All right, so today I'm joined by Adrian Lee, coming off a win over Shozo Isojima over at One Championship. How you been, man? It's been about a year since we last spoke.
Yeah, man, I've been doing great. I've been just, basically I've been in camp ever since, the fight before this fight. And yeah, it's been great. Life's been great. I'm happy to be back in the win column.
Okay. And yeah, we kind of spoke about that a second ago. You got to be doing better now. For those that don't know, you were given a really tough matchup in that last one with Tye Ruotolo. You were coming off a loss, so then you just fought Shozo back in the win column now.
Yeah, honestly, like I absolutely hated being 3-1. That entire few months where I was 3-1, like I hated like, the fact that I even had a loss on my record now. But, I was able to kind of come to terms with it and, like you can't really change the past. So I've been just trying to, take as much as I can ever since from that loss and use it to, uh, help me progress myself as an MMA fighter.
Okay. Well, just kind of even speaking about that fight and everything, that one kind of took me by surprise just because I didn't imagine that they would match you two prospects up right against each other like right away. I mean, wasn't that Ty's debut or no?
Yeah, it was also Ty's debut, and yeah, honestly, I was pretty surprised too. I definitely thought that a fight with the Ruotolo boys would be something, I was going to see them later on in my career. But yeah, what the organization wants, they're going to get. So, yeah, but at the end of the day, it happened and it was great. It was a great learning experience.
Okay. Was that the first one that they offered to you, or were you like going back and forth between like a few opponents and it just happened to land on Ty, or how did that matchup even kind of come together?
Yeah, the fight with Ty, they were kind of pushing for Ty. Yeah, I saw Tye Ruotolo, he was calling me out online and stuff too, and One Championship was pushing for it, and so that's just, how the fight ended up happening.
Okay. And then they're kind of famous for being brothers too, right? And then you and your whole family, you guys both come from fighting families. So what was
Mhm.
that dynamic like kind of like throughout fight week? Seeing like, him with his brother, you're with your brother and shit like that.
I mean, I feel like I didn't really take that into consideration too much. I mean, like whenever I saw them, I greeted them because I got no hard feelings against them. It's just a fight game. But yeah, that's how it was.
Okay. And then I don't want to like dwell too much on it, but I think this is just questions that the fans want to hear, so maybe we can just do this one for them. But how did the fight going into it, you were very confident, right? Because it is Ty's debut. You spent your whole life doing this, training
Mhm.
martial arts. So the way you kind of expected it versus how it played out, can you just talk about that a little bit as well?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Going into that fight, I was, very confident in my skill set and how we lined it up. I fully believed I was going to come out with the win. Unfortunately, because of how the fight played out, that wasn't my night. But, I still fully believe that that same night I could have gone back and beat Ty, It's just the way it played out, a few things that went into, the camp that happened leading up to the fight. But yeah, it was unfortunate. As soon as we started the fight, he got in on my legs and we went right into his world. And the Ruotolo boys, they can hang out, they can hang with anybody in the world on the ground. So definitely I was sucked right into his game right away. I wasn't able to get off my game plan. But yeah, I was happy that I was able to, kind of stifle all of his attempts on the ground. I feel like I may have overestimated the gap between our grappling skills. Like, yeah, going into it, I feel like I was able to really just hang with Ty on the ground. And I feel like if I was able to kind of play my own game plan more so going into that fight, as opposed to, changing up my game to fight Ty since his specialty is grappling, I believe that, it would have seen a better game come out of myself.
Okay, so you almost like once you guys started getting in those grappling exchanges, that wasn't the game plan, but like in hindsight, you liked the way you kind of performed in some of those exchanges, and you should have probably maybe not given so much respect to his grappling. Is that almost what you're saying?
Yeah, honestly, in a sense, because it's not so much that I'm not discrediting him as a grappler at all, but for what I'm saying is that, I believe that, our grappling skill sets aren't so far apart. And I believe that if I went into that fight, like changing up the game plan a little bit, I believe that, that would have also led to a different outcome.
Okay, got you. And how did he kind of like how did the fight play out to where like you ended up falling into his game plan? Like what's your memory of that?
Yeah, going into that fight, I was kind of going into it a little bit blind per se, just because, I've never seen Tye fight before. Going into the fight, we didn't know if he was going to be a southpaw or an orthodox, and we didn't really know what their game plan was going to be, how he was going to strike. So I think, him coming out in southpaw and he kind of got in on my leg real quick. That was just partly my fault. I was a little bit too excited to get into the striking and that's what gave him the pocket and the opportunity. But yeah, these things happen. It's just the fight game.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's probably kind of weird going into a fight where you have no film on your opponent. So
Yeah.
obviously tough to prepare for.
Mhm.
Speaking of preparing though, and some of the things that went down before the fight actually took place, did you want to address any of that stuff by chance? Not to let you make excuses and stuff like that, but just asking if you wanted to address anything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, honestly, I'm not really one to make excuses. No one ever goes into a fight being 100%, I mean, obviously, it would have been better if we just hadn't taken the fight because because of the fact that I had a fracture in my back that we didn't find out until after the fight. And also leading up to it, I had a rib injury, which stopped me from sparring for a few weeks out. So I mean, every fighter is gonna go through these injuries throughout their fight camps, and it's their own fault if they decide to go and fight and they lose that fight for themselves. So yeah, no excuses from me.
Okay. In other words, you signed the contract, so you're not using this as a reason why like you lost per se, but you're almost saying like if you guys fight again, and you don't have these things going on, you're a lot more confident in what you can deliver on the
Yeah,
night.
100%. Honestly, I believe that if my body was at 100% throughout the camp, throughout that fight, I fully believe that it's going to be a different outcome. Yeah, like as you said, I'm not making any excuses, but I want to say that, if I'm 100% going into my next fight with Ty, I feel like even today, I would be very different.
Okay. And then how did you get past everything? Speaking about this fight that you just had last weekend, the 3 months you said that you hated it, being like coming off that loss. So what was the process of just kind of going through everything and then switching over to get ready for this fight and kind of like forgetting about the past? If you did forget about the past.
Mhm. Yeah, honestly, it's not so much about forgetting about the past. For me, it was more so coming to, kind of like a conclusion with it. Just the fact that, it's happened and that, there's nothing I can do about it. And I feel like, once I was able to kind of get past the initial shock of like, like my career taking this turn for the worst per se at that time, I believe that, I don't believe that like what when everyone says like what's happened was meant to happen. I fully believe that that fight could have been different and my career would have gone on in the same trajectory. But I feel like ever since that fight, it's really kind of jump started my career even further. I feel like I've grown tenfold from that fight with Ty than my past first three fights, and I feel like I've really developed my skills as a fighter.
Did it kind of like show you what to work on almost through that
Yeah,
fight?
yeah, definitely. It was my first time ever facing any adversity inside of the ring. My first three fights, I blew past them. I was able to just kind of get in there, execute my game plan, and that was the first time, I've ever been taken down, first time I've lost around, and it was, yeah, it was definitely a big learning experience.
Okay. What was if you could tell me, because I know you have a big family, they all support you. So I won't ask you what everybody said to you, but maybe like what was the best piece of advice you got coming off the loss, whatever it was that stands out to you if you got anything.
Yeah, I think. Honestly, after the fight, there wasn't too many things where it was like I needed to be told because it was kind of everything I already knew. But I think what do you call when some words of advice, my brother gave me and my coaches gave me was that, just loss is a part of life and all champions have lost some time in their career, sometime in life. And it's really true, it's kind of crazy in this fight game. Like it's the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And yeah, all champions have lost sometimes in their life, inside of their career, and it's just something you have to get through.
Okay. And so kind of just going back to the question that the main realization you got from the fight is that it's just a part of life. Don't get too down on yourself over it necessarily. Just move forward.
Yeah, I'd say, it was yeah, I'd say it's just I've summed it up to, loss is a part of life. I mean, everyone loses sometime. Like life is unforgiving, and you can't control everything that happens, like all outcomes. You can just do your best to prepare yourself for it, and what's gonna happen is gonna happen.